On this episode, should we be giving credit to green stormwater infrastructure for its benefits to reduce stormwater volumes and prevent flooding? This is a lesson from the Netherlands. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. It's coming to the end of my time in the Netherlands. This is probably the second last video that you're going to see on this trip. I'm definitely planning to come back. And so I've been reflecting on, well, what did I take away from this? I met a bunch of interesting people, got to talk to a bunch of people working in this space. What have I learned from it? And the thing that stood out for me is that when I reflect on water-sensitive urban design in Australia, I reflect on the fact that, hey, our driver for starting to build this green infrastructure, starting to do this water-sensitive urban design, was protection of environments, protection of waterways, protections of bays, protections of our lovely creeks and our rivers. But that's not the case for everywhere in the world. If you go to Portland in the US, then the driver for putting this stuff in is preventing stormwater getting into combined sewers. And if you come to the Netherlands, the driver for this is flooding. So the Netherlands is a country that's typically had a very steady and consistent rainfall pattern. It rains a fair bit, but it doesn't rain super intense. But with climate change, that is changing. With climate change, it's changing, and they're getting more intense events. Flooding is going to be a problem because their drainage system of all these lovely cities of Amsterdam, Delft, and Rotterdam wasn't designed with intense rainfall in mind. It was designed with historical rainfall of a more consistent rainfall pattern. So they have a real driver to implement or to do whatever they can to prevent this potential flooding in the future. And that is driving a lot of their water-sensitive urban design, but under a different name, water-sensitive urban design measures. We've seen in the previous videos the water squares as well, but they're also building bioretention systems like rain garden type systems. And I got taken to one site where there was water being directed off a road into a park where there was an infiltration trench just to infiltrate that water within the park itself. And what this got me thinking about is, clearly there's enough confidence in the Netherlands here in the ability of these systems to prevent flooding because they're investing a lot in them. And reflecting back home, that made me go, but that's not the case back home. Because back home in Australia, if you propose to build a bioretention system, for example, we go to great lengths to ensure that nothing that the bioretention system does in terms of stormwater volumes credits in any way towards flood prevention or flood mitigation. A classic example of this is, so say that you build a combined bioretention and flood detention basin, right? So you have the biofilter on the bottom, it's got its filter media below the ground. We have the extended detention depth above, so the first 300 mils that store water to infiltrate into the bioretention system. So it's 300 mils, infiltration rate, even if it's slowed down a bit, it's like 100 mils an hour. Okay, sweet, that's going to drain down over about 3 hours. And then we have the flood storage on top of that, the detention, that fills up when it's raining but drains out pretty quickly afterwards and attenuates the peak flows. Well, here's the thing at the moment. In Australia, that first 300 mils, you cannot get credit for the flood detention. I mean, it traps the water, it stores the water, it even releases it pretty quickly in like 3 hours, even if it's draining at only 50 mils an hour, which is actually pretty slow. It releases it in 6 hours in that point. You can't get credit for that in terms of its flood storage. Clearly, it helps to mitigate peak flows, right? The water is stored and it's released slowly afterwards, right? Clearly, this has a benefit, but you cannot get credit for it. You're not allowed to. You just have to assume that it doesn't exist and then model your storage on top of that. And that, that might not seem that significant. You might be like, okay, what does that actually mean? I have done some back of the envelope calculations. So imagine that you've got a combined bioretention and detention system where the base of it is, so the filter media area is 10 meters by 20 meters. So this is about 200 meters squared. It's probably about the size of bioretention system and detention system you're going to get off maybe 2 hectares worth of catchment. Because the batters run out sideways from this, right? If you could get credit for the bottom 300 mils, you wouldn't need to make the bioretention detention system as deep as you otherwise would, because you wouldn't be going 300 mils that we pretend doesn't exist and then storage on top. We just have 300 mils, of which the detention storage counts as part of that, and then the remainder storage on top. if you have this system that's 10 metres by 20 metres, that makes the total footprint of the basin, how much bigger do you reckon? 1 in 4 banners, because that's pretty common to see 1 in 4 banners, that makes the total footprint of the basin 78 square metres larger. And I'm like, 78, that sort of sounds like a lot, but does that actually matter? Well, think about this, that's 78 square metres that could be used as additional open space for parkland, actually usable open space. That's an additional 78 metres that the developer could sell and make a profit on. So let's put a price on that. What does that actually mean? Well, I Googled just recently, just here, a few minutes ago, the price that land in Yarrabilba. So this is like, I don't know what, 40 minutes south of Brisbane. New development, lots of houses going in there. The price of land at Yarrabilba, 400 square metre blocks, undeveloped, selling for about $200,000. So, at 78 square metres of wasted land, when 400 sells for $200,000, that means that those 78 square metres of land are worth about $40,000. And you're like, okay, $40,000. Look, a developer's selling a lot of land. $40,000 is a lot, but maybe it's not a lot in the scale of things. So let's scale this up to southeast Queensland. According to the Queensland Government statistician's broad hectare land availability study from 2013, at that point in time, they predicted over the next 2 years, so 2014 and 2015, that there was available and would develop, by the way, broad hectare land is like land parcels over 2,500 square metres in size, for example. They predicted that there was roughly 7,000 hectares of land in southeast Queensland alone that would develop in those 2 years. That's about 3,500 hectares per year. So then if we multiply this out and we take the $40,000 that was for 2 hectares, so we'll divide it by 2, all right? So we get 20,000 hectares, $20,000 of wasted, otherwise developable land because of this 300 mils of extended detention depth. So $20,000 per hectare. And then we multiply it by the 3,500 hectares, you get something like $70 million of wasted land a year in southeast Queensland alone, simply because we won't give credit to the bottom 300, like the 300 mils of extended detention for bioretention, to flood detention. Now, quite rightly, you're probably going to be like, actually, Jack, does every one of those 7,000 hectares per 2 years, 3,500 hectares per year, develop? Maybe not. Does every one of them build a bioretention system or a detention system? Maybe not. Probably a detention system, because we're talking broad hectare. Probably a bioretention system, because we're talking broad hectare land above 2,500 square metres and 2,500 is the SPP threshold. Blah, blah, blah. The point being, maybe we need some contingencies. Let's assume that it's only 25% of those that actually, 25% of that land actually develops and this actually applies to them. Sweet. Now we're down to like $18 million a year. It's still a lot. And so this is the point. This is one thing I've taken away from the Netherlands. It seems to be that if other countries overseas can give credit for the volume reductions of, green infrastructure stormwater, why can't we in Australia? Why are we in this really, really risk averse? Oh no, we couldn't do that. And there's a few reasons for this. There was concerns in the early days that maybe bioretention systems would clog up and not drain. And if they were permanently storing water there, then sure, that's not going to give a flood detention benefit because it's already going to be full before the rainfall event starts. But this just isn't the case. We just don't see huge numbers of bioretention systems permanently ponding water anymore because we know heaps about how to keep them freely draining. We have a filter media that's designed to keep them freely draining. We know that if you keep the plants in there, they'll restore and actually enhance the hydraulic conductivity. The reality is if you walk around, I seriously challenge you to find me a significant number of bioretention systems that are permanently clogged up. Sure, there are some that drain slowly, but by slowly we still end up with 6 hours to drain down. It's not a crazy long period of time. The reality is this, in my opinion, we are being overly risk averse for not giving credit to the bottom 300 mils as flood storage. And because of that, we are literally costing ourselves, in southeast Queensland alone, millions of dollars in otherwise developable land or otherwise open spaceable land or just otherwise useful land every year. So that's lesson number one. But the thing is, we can actually take this further because it's not the credit that's being given in the Netherlands and in Portland for that matter for the hydrologic and hydraulic benefits of bioretention systems. And I'm just using bioretention because this is the example that's most pertinent to Australia because we build so many of them. But if we come to other places in the world, they're actually building a whole bunch of other different things. So they're building infiltration systems and they're building permeable pavement and all this other stuff. The reality is that it's not this 300 mils of storage on top that they're giving credit for. In Amsterdam, I got taken to what was similarly but slightly different to a bioretention system. Essentially, it's an infiltration system to get stormwater away. What they're doing, it's not like they're storing it and releasing it slowly the way a detention system would. They're actually just infiltrating it to get rid of volumes. So what they're giving credit for is what happens to the water as it infiltrates through the filter media. And of course, that's a crazy idea at the moment in Australia, that a bioretention system might actually just disappear water from the system. And yet, there is a surprising amount of research starting to appear in this space that, now it's by no means comprehensive and it shows a lot of variability, right? So this is not, so while the first bit that I talked about, I would fairly happily tomorrow just be like, look, can we start giving credit for the 300 mils for detention? This next bit I'm going to talk about is more of a future possibility, but we need to do more work sort of space, more research to get rid of some of this variability. There's a surprising number of papers popping up already that show that bioretention systems disappear volumes of stormwater in large quantities. So there are 4 particular papers. I'll need to put them into this video as references. I was made aware of these papers by Alan Hoban. There are 4 particular papers that show that bioretention systems, some of which had impervious liners, so it's not like, where's the water even going to start with, reducing stormwater volumes by between 23 and 78%, right? So the water that going into the system in these tests was disappearing by between 23, so 23% of it just going, never coming back out again through the outflow pipe. Clearly, it's going somewhere. Conservation of mass, it needs to go somewhere, but it's not coming back out the outlet pipe at the bottom. Where is it going? The answer is, we're not really sure. But between 23% of water just disappearing for our current understanding and 78%, that's a lot of water. That actually has potential to affect how we size downstream stormwater infrastructure. Here's an example. The paper by Lukey and Nichols, 2015, looked at 3 streetscape bioretention systems on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. They dosed them with synthetic stormwater to replicate a 2-year ARI event on the Sunshine Coast. I believe that might have been a 30 mil event. You might need to check the paper for that. But nonetheless, it's the Sunshine Coast. It does rain a fair bit. It's not an insignificant event to be talking about. They dosed those systems with synthetic stormwater to represent a 2-year ARI event and saw volumetric losses through those systems for a 2-year ARI event of between 30-ish and 70-ish% with an average of around 60% loss. Now that's really significant because it's not like they just dosed them with a 3-month ARI event and then got these great losses for 3 months, but in anything bigger, heaps is going to bypass. This was a 2-year ARI event, and the 2-year ARI is often used to size the minor drainage system in Australia. Not always. For example, Brisbane City Council has different criteria for different parts of the city. Rural residential and lower density residential is the 2-year ARI, whereas higher density city centre areas, it's the 10-year ARI. But if you've got, what this starts to point towards is that if you've got an area that has a minor drainage system that conveys the 2-year ARI, it is actually feasible, although not set in stone by any means, but feasible, that implementing bioretention systems upstream of that could actually have a significant enough reduction, a significant enough benefit in volume reductions to mean that you could size the pipework in the minor drainage system smaller. And that is massive. Because suddenly, the implementation of WUSID measures, yes, they cost stuff, but some of that cost can be offset, potentially, by downsizing the stormwater drainage system. And it's not like we're talking about downsizing the major drainage system here, right? It's not like we're talking about downsizing the drainage system that conveys most of the water in a 100-year ARI event. What we're talking about is downsizing the smaller, more regular event. So even if that did screw up, it would then go across the road in what is the major drainage flow path. And so these are the sorts of things that I'm now thinking about from the Netherlands. If it's good enough for the Netherlands to be starting to think about and actually implementing, not just thinking about, but actually implementing this water sensitive urban design infrastructure to help prevent their very real flooding problems, why is it not good enough for us in Australia? Why is it not? And this is really significant because at the moment we treat stormwater quality, like the environmental stuff we do for stormwater, like bioretention systems, completely separately to stormwater quantity. Like, we talk about water sensitive urban design, about these multiple benefits. Oh, let's implement stormwater infrastructure that integrates with parkland to make parkland better, or integrates with efforts to mitigate the urban heat island effect. Hang on a minute. Let's talk about implementing stormwater quality in like worsted infrastructure that integrates with flooding, the same discipline. Right? This is the insanity of this. This is the insanity of this, is that we don't even have an integration in how we manage stormwater. We pretend that all that stormwater that has environmental harm over there is different to that stormwater over here that does flooding. It's completely bonkers, and it's costing us huge amounts of money. And from my observation of other parts of the world, it doesn't need to be that way. We could actually step forward and treat these as a single, unified space, and we might actually get somewhere. We might actually make some really good improvements. And this is the lesson that I've taken away from the Netherlands on this particular trip. I'm really looking forward to coming back in the future. I've got a few other tidbits and little things to pursue and some stuff, but that's the one that I've reflected on top of everything that we've talked about in these previous videos, on top of the meeting with Lot and talking about Amsterdam rainproof and how we maybe deal with the existing city, on top of going to the water square with Floris. That is what I've taken away from this. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this episode. We have one more episode coming to you from the Netherlands, so you have to tune in for that. But until then, stumbling over my words, until then, I'll see you soon.